Hey, welcome back to the Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Before we jump into today's topic, I just want to take a minute to thank the sponsors of the podcast. This episode is sponsored by Tona Law. They're not just another law firm. They're defining what it means to fight for their clients. We get a lot of attorney referrals from across the country. We pay fee participation in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. We focus on integrity, innovation, and relentless advocacy. Tona Law is proving that the business of law can scale without losing its heart. If you want to see how a modern firm is built for impact and happy client referrals, check out tonalaw.com. Mention again the Lead Counsel Podcast, and I'm happy to get on the phone with you. Seth Price from Price Benowitz. You will never meet more down-to-earth, humble guys than, like, I've now known Seth a couple of years now. We've been seeing each other at different masterminds, and I just can't tell you how humbling it is to be in your groups and have you facilitating and to learn from you. And like, man, you can drill down on issues. You clearly know my pain points as I'm making the journey to 8 figures, right?
Well, that's part of what's sort of good about, and as you see, like, depends on how your firm is set up. My law firm, because I have all these different practice groups, the good news is if you're ADHD like me, it's like there's always something on fire. So there's always something to put your attention to. And when that gets boring, you go somewhere else. So to a certain extent, been there, done that. And I think one of the things I just focus on is trying to learn from those things in the past. One of the things I love about Fisher's group, mastermind group, is even though some of the people aren't as advanced, when I think about those issues, the fundamentals that get you there, fundamentals are fundamentals. And if you do it at a smaller scale and then you supersize it, great. And yes, just like kids, bigger issues. But there are certain fundamentals about how you build and how you grow and how you deal with people that I think generally comport across the boards. And so that's why it's really neat when you see people at different stages. There's things you forgot about on the way, right? How do you make that first hire, that first administrative hire? We heard a lot about that, right? Now I think that is a given. But I also do remember way back when I started not wanting to spend money on non-revenue producing things. I was way late to the game getting sort of an administrative person hired too cheaply. Got very lucky in my journey to have somebody who came on board and built and grew with me. But that person, that non-lawyer ops people, forget about marketing. Juliet's the most important person at the firm. I get that.
Right. She is.
Yeah. So like the golden trio, right? As you build and grow is you need to make the phones ring so that you got to have your marketing and some strategy, whatever it may be, in place. Secondly, when the phones ring, somebody's got to answer it. And that's not talked about nearly enough. I mean, there are people out there talking about it, but it is the least sexy. And, you do all the marketing in the world, but if you're not converting or converting really poorly. And then finally, the ops. I'm taking the lawyering out of this, right? So the way I've built my firm, I divided and conquered from day one with a partner where he was in charge of lawyering and I was in charge of everything else. And so that ops piece where you extricate yourself, and I think a lot of myself, but I was not the greatest with ops, meaning there are people that are more attention to detail, less ADHD, who can actually get things to move along. And that if you do want to build and scale, it is that giving up. And that's what I see most people having the hardest time with is how much do you still have your hand in stuff? And how much harm are you doing? And again, present company included, when you continue to try to dabble rather than build that great pyramid and let your direct reports do their job. But as you scale, when you see people that don't fit the mold, the culture of what you're doing, I'm now at the point where I see times where I see opportunity where I'd love to hire people. I know I'd make money, but if it can hurt your entire kingdom, if it could bring I don't say the house of cards, but it could bring the whole pyramid, not down, but really take out a piece of it, like a Jenga game, you just got to be really careful. And that stuff, decisions and flyers.
Is it possible to maintain culture and the shared core values and still scale to 100 or 150 employees? And is it possible? And what are the biggest pain points in that process other than what you've already discussed? Like, I know you said, maintaining it and the moves you make, but
I think that I'm humble enough to come with that. We built with our head down. That's what got us there, right? Dave and I are, we treat people well. We're not compared to the rest of the legal profession. We're well within the standard deviation of non-crazy. And so I think we layered some of this on. I think that it is an aspiration that, we have and we want to live within it. But I would argue that as you repeat these things, like way back, I remember one of my close buddies had like a plaque on his wall with their core values. It was literally something bought on Amazon with random words on it. Right. And it wasn't until you sit down and think about what do you stand for. And, there are different, some people beat it with a drum at their weekly meetings. As you say it over and over again, it becomes a thing. Like as you interview with them, ours
Yes.
is PI, passion, integrity, excellence, right? And so as we talk to each person coming in, do you have the passion for what you're doing? Integrity we take as table stakes. Are you great at what you're doing? You look at those and it becomes a thing that we do over and over again. The theory becomes reality. And that I would say, are things perfect? Does that mean that like it is something that as you strive to be better and better that way each day, and as you get further and further away from people, like when we started, I knew everybody, I knew everybody's significant other, I knew their birthday. As you build and grow, you need to have these touch points. And as you have those commonalities, I think it leaves the concept of a sign and becomes sort of how you think about things. And if you hire and fire with them, if you run your meetings with them, when you make evaluations on promotions, those things that as you implement it, I saw it like mentors of mine, like John Morgan. I remember when I read his book, which is Genius, the Each Hungry book. I knew him well enough to know that a lot of the stuff he talked about in the book wasn't necessarily being done at that moment. But sure as shit, if you watch the last decade,
yes,
put a lot of that stuff in. He said, I want to be there. And by saying it, it became.
Christopher Nicolaysen. Did I say that right?
You did.
I did. The one thing that I am always obsessed with is the customer service aspect, client service. And I know that's a big focus for you. So can you give me your philosophy, your systems, your methodology? Break it down, because I still believe no matter how big you grow, one of the best marketing tools that you can employ is caring about the client.
Yeah.
Truly caring about the client. So break it down for people that are listening that are like wrapped up in the business side or the financial side, why it's so important as a personal injury firm to remember that the client's at the center of it.
Yeah. So I'll go back a bit. I could talk customer service. We could talk about it now for the next few hours, but it's the reality here is I grew up working in restaurants and retail. So I worked those. I lived in Vegas for 10 years, opened up the Banana Republic at the Venetian, worked at restaurants on the Strip and things like that. I'm a huge foodie and I have gone to some pretty high-end restaurants watching some really good chefs do some great things. But the thing I realize is we all know what great customer service looks like to each of us individually whenever we go out to eat, right? We all have a certain checklist in our head of like, this will be a really good service experience whenever we walk through. Like for me, it's like, I want my drink refilled without having to ask. I do not want to wait for my check too long. I don't want the waiter coming to sit at my booth with me. You know what I mean? Those types of things that we've all probably had happen. We all have that checklist. But the one thing we don't have in legal or at a PI firm, customers don't have that checklist. They don't know what that is. And I think one of the easiest things that I talk to my team about a lot is one of the biggest bar complaints that we all get as attorneys is poor communication or lack of communication, right? And in a world these days where we can communicate in so many different methods, which is, Zoom, in-person, phone, email, text, automated, what have you. I think it's so imperative that we are finding a variety of different ways to communicate. And that's even on social, it's on through a newsletter and what have you. So one of the ways that you've got to think about it is we cannot be the guide or the example when we think about it ourselves. Because I think the fault that a lot of firms have is they go, well, I wouldn't like to be contacted that often. Right. The reality is we actually have to get outside of ourselves and go, but what does great customer service looks like? It means walking through the hand, but it can also mean, walking them through the store, showing them the new items, doing those types of things. Same thing here. Let's walk them through the case. Let's talk to them. They've never done this before. And so sometimes I think it's as easy as the things that we believe we know that maybe we're like, well, they should know. So like, how many times do we ask somebody, did you take photos? Well, no, I never thought of that. Right. What cross streets were you at? What was the weather like, right? What we view as basic questions, I think we really have to be open to just walking through and teaching. So I was also an elementary school teacher. And I do think that it's imperative that we stop and we teach and educate at the same time, which is a component of customer service. So when you go out to a restaurant, what are they doing? They're educating you about what the special is for the day. They're teaching you about what's happening, and walking through which wine pairing will work and what have you. So that's where I think when we do those pieces. Now, the other side of it then, once you've got them on as clients, it's important now to stop and listen. Who are they? What do they like? What do they not like? How do they want to be communicated with? How many kids do they have? What are their kids doing? Do they have pets? Things like that. And now you can use those to really enhance the customer service journey throughout.
You brought up before we got on the issue of leadership struggling with micromanagement, which I have been obsessed with this because I know so many firms that have lost key players because of this. So talk a little bit about fostering autonomy and trust within your team.
Yeah, I think you got to do it, for me at least. Like I said, I'm 49. Whenever I turned 40, time really started to have a lot of value for me over money and, title or what have you, right?
It gets worse at 50 and 55.
So I think it's one of those things where I stress to every team member, I have zero desire to micromanage because I don't want to do your job, and if I have to, because I remember I had an employee once as we were walking down the hall, she asked me, she's like, where do we keep the wet signature power of attorney documents in the office? And I looked at her and I said, I have no idea. And she goes, shut up. She like hit me on the shoulder.
Right.
Shut up. Yeah, you do. And I'm like, no, really, I don't. And you don't want me to know that, because if I know that, then I'm not thinking about everything else on how we're moving from here today to down here down the road. And so I think for us, it's really important to empower them. And now I can empower them in 50 million different ways, which are through resources, conferences, books, finding a mentor, doing all of these other things. But I want them to become the experts in their field at those specific areas. Now, what's interesting is when we get new employees in, and I don't know if y'all have walked through this or not, is some people actually have some, what I'd call almost PTSD from prior employers going, holy cow, man, this is really, really weird. And they feel really off put going, am I being punked right now? Is something really weird happening? Yeah. And so I get some people where I've got to actually sit down, because I had one newer employee where she came in and then she switched some stuff in her office and I noticed the change. And so I slacked her and I was like, dude, I'm loving the office change. It's great. And she immediately slacked back. She's like, I'm so sorry. I should have asked you right away if I could have done that. And so I walked into her office. I'm like, whoa. We got to have a chat, because I think when we micromanage, it's more about our own ego. And
fear and ego. Yep.
Yeah. It shows our own insecurities as owners and bosses, where when we let go of that and provide autonomy, then I actually think that's when the floodgates will open up, and you want to be successful and you want to help people flourish. Let it go. You think it's control and power, and it's so off. It's really not.
So if you could give one piece of advice to somebody who's starting their own law firm, what would it be?
My biggest piece of advice to somebody starting would be to find a tribe or find a group of people that you can talk to. Reach out to somebody. There are no stupid questions, because if you're just starting, you're going to feel at times that you're on an island, and you're going to feel alone, and you're going to feel like no one else has ever gone through this or struggled this way or, made these mistakes. But I promise you, people out there have, and there is a huge group of people out there that want to support and help, because the reality is, especially in the plaintiff side, is like the better we all do, it just helps everybody. And so it's not a competition piece where we're sitting here trying to just bring each other down, which is what they teach you in law school. It's so different than that. It's more collaborative and helpful. And how good does it feel for people like you and I to go out and teach or help others, sit and have a lunch and just kind of shoot the stuff and go, okay, because back in September of 2017, I was that person just starting out, where I had a group of people talk to me and help me and lead me away.
And lift you up Quick break to thank the sponsors of the podcast. This episode is supported by Tona Law, a modern law firm built on integrity and innovation. Learn how they're changing the game at tonalaw.com. Attorney referrals accepted from across the country. You'll see what it's like when you send us a case. You'll have some happy clients. We are here with Michelle Dellino. There's a reason why you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, my friend. Yeah. We've all been there. You're learning the process, where you realize that chasing that top line revenue number without the profit and some real hard knowledge of the data is, we've all gone through it. We've all done it. It's part of the process. So I'm assuming when you went through those pain points, you learned those same lessons, and you got to the point where you have to then scale back to start again, and you've done all that.
Yeah, you got to make changes. I think in the beginning, I was, I'm I would say I have a high risk tolerance profile. So I'm kind of like, let's hire as many people as we can and let's do all these things. And then you realize you don't have the systems for it and you don't have the infrastructure. So then you got to take a step back and get the infrastructure to make it sustainable. So I definitely learned from growing too fast without infrastructure and then having to go back and put that in place. I can tell you, Tom, I've made so many mistakes, but every time, we all all have, right? But
Yeah.
it's really what you learn from them, because you don't get there unless you make those mistakes, unless you're up until the middle of the night worrying about what's going to happen and what you're going to do and figuring it out, and then learning how to delegate. And for me, I had a hard time learning how to delegate, but you really do have to like delegate to elevate, as they say. So figuring that out took me longer than maybe it should have. But once I did, you know, it was kind of no stopping.
I hate to put you on the spot, but give me your core values for your firm. I know you have core values for your firm. And I want to see how you're applying those as filters, both in hiring and beyond hiring, right? With clients even.
Yeah. And I would say that when I think about our values, that was probably one of the most valuable things about EOS when we first implemented it, was really drilling down on like what was important and what our values are. And I will say, you know, when I talk about mistakes that I've made before I like give you the values, one of the things, the mistakes I've made at times is not bringing everything back to that. And we have focused, as we've grown, really heavily in the last few years about evaluating our people with our values, evaluating what we're doing when we make decisions. And when we've gotten away from that is where we've gotten into trouble. The number one value for us is communication. For me, like that was kind of how I built my practice in the beginning, was just communicating really well with people. I realized like what a low bar that is, unfortunately, in our industry.
Right.
And it's like, if you're just getting back to people and talking to them in a way that's real, they love that. So communication is number one. Excellence in what we do is obvious, but that's number two. Like you said, if you've got 20 bad lawyers, it doesn't help you. Accountability is number three. We believe in being accountable to ourselves and to the clients. And diligence is another one. That's kind of one of my personal values. I used to feel like, okay, maybe I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I can outwork anybody. So, you know, hard work is super just important to me, always has been. And then we have two more. One we added like 2 years ago. The last two are loyalty to the firm and the mission, kind of a overarching, let's stay loyal to the values. And then the last one is growth. Some people prefer to say adaptability, but I like to just call it growth, even though our team kind of clashed over what to call it. But I tell people, like, if you don't want to be somewhere that's going to grow, where we're going to challenge you and push you, and where we're focused on what's next and what's better for the client, then you don't want to be here. If you want to go be somewhere where they're still, you know, doing paper files and doing everything the way they've always done it, then don't be here. But if you want to grow and you're adaptable, be here. And we believe in always trying to provide better things for our clients. We're trying to do some new things. We've introduced case status, which family firms aren't really using. I'm always looking for something better to help us grow and serve the clients. Like if it's not serving clients well or it's not making money, we shouldn't be doing it. Is kind of how I see it. So
I've heard you mention this almost on every podcast I listen to with you, is your comfort level with risk. Your number one advice is taking risk. So what's the scariest risk you took that ended up paying off in a big way?
I mean, it sounds so basic, but the scariest risk I took was realizing that I shouldn't be managing the lawyers anymore. Lee Rosen, I don't know if you know Lee.
I do.
Lee Rosen, like I learned, that's where I met Ryan in the first place, and Jay Ruane. And Lee would tell me when I was using him for coaching early on, like, you're not going to get where you want to be unless you get out of your own way. And he also was kind of like, you're also going to fail with the first, couple of people probably that you hire in a managing attorney role. So get ready.
I wish it was only a couple.
Yeah. So it's like, get ready to fail and have this massive failure, and it's going to hurt. But if you don't do it, you're never going to get there. So that was really scary for me, because I just sort of felt like I was conflating being the managing attorney with being the CEO of the firm. And I wasn't really understanding the difference. And I don't know why it took me as long as it did, but I realized, after a lot of pain, that I should not be managing the lawyers. We weren't going to grow to where we needed to be. So I went through some of that failure and finally got, somebody in that seat, and it really paid off for me, because then I didn't have to worry about, should I hire this associate? I don't have time to deal with them. I don't want to deal with them. I got somebody else to do that I'm paying to do that. And I can start to do the things that no one else could do. Somebody else can manage the lawyers. I didn't need to be doing that. Sickness that you think you got to do everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I also think, you bring up an interesting distinction that none of this you learn except the hard way, which is there's a huge difference between leading and managing.
Yeah. Huge.
Right? Huge. And you don't understand it. And then all of a sudden you have that epiphany and you go, I don't want to do this anymore. So you talked about your big epiphany of, I'm going to basically fire myself as the managing attorney.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm out of that seat. But I recently had the epiphany of I'm firing myself out of operations. I hate it.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it.
Good one.
And it's eating too much of my time.
Yeah.
And I had that same epiphany, right? And to me, when you reach a certain size or scale, you go, is it a risk? Maybe, but is it really a big risk? Is it really a big risk if I'm doing the right analysis on the people that I bring in to then fill those seats? Right.
You make a good point about operations. I think that's something that a lot of the time people have a hard time letting go of because they think, oh, well, that is the business. That's running the business. That's true, but that's not the same thing as, as being a leader at all. No, it was easier for me to do that because I knew, like you, I knew I didn't like it. I didn't want to be doing it. So, I hired my brother to start doing that in 2019. And that was a great move. It was harder for me to let go of the other stuff, but you make a good point. A lot of people don't think about how important it is and what a time suck it is and how we're not the right people to be doing it.
No. Look, I think that at the highest levels of what we're trying to do and the game we're trying to play is you got to do a lot of deep focus work on the stuff between your ears, which means spending time with pen and paper, isolated, right? Really isolated. And so don't just sit down and write down 5 nice things that sound good on a piece of paper.
No.
What do you stand for? And that's typically where the core values of the organization will come from, right? Because first it is, what is your why? What do you stand for? And then you could say, oh, this is the business I want. This is what I want my business to stand for. And then start to align the people, the clients, the vendors, all around that.
Yeah.
So
if you don't know who you are, if you don't know where you're starting from, then you don't know the business that you want. That's totally true. And what you said really, what you just dropped is so true. You have to spend that time with what's between your head. And I think a lot of law firm, maybe people listening, a lot of people have a hard time realizing that's the work.
That's the work.
Yeah, you have to have time on your calendar where you're not running around doing all the things. Like you have to have the time up here in between your ears because that's where the work is. That's where the ideas are. That's where you figure out what your values are. If you don't spend that time and you're just too busy working on the client work or doing the next thing, you're not going to figure it out. Right. You're missing out, right? Yeah, right. That's the work. That was a brilliant thing that you said. That is the work.
Accomplishing the scaling that you have, right? What are you at, 16 attorneys now?
Yeah, 16
in 10 years.
Yeah.
So what do you attribute that rapid growth to? If you had to pick like a handful of things, marketing's got to be a big part of that, right? Because if you have the work coming in, now you got to service the work. So like, did you have a marketing secret that kind of triggered things?
I wish that I did, but no, I think in the early years, I spent no money on marketing. I didn't do anything. I didn't spend money on marketing. It was really like word of mouth and hustle. And the best advice, if anybody is looking to scale and they're just trying to think, should I spend money on marketing? The best advice I got in the beginning was, and again, this was Lee Rosen, it was find 20 referral sources, or even start with 10. Find 10 or 20 referral sources that will refer to you every other month, 6 times a year. And think about it. Like for me, I was like, okay, a decent family law case back then was worth 20 grand. So if I've got 20 people referring to me, I've got 10 people referring to me. And that's a really easy way to build $1 million business that's sustainable with no marketing. Right. So that was the first thing I did. And then I started layering the marketing. And now we're doing all kinds of cool marketing stuff now. But really for me, the growth was about making it be sustainable by not, being dependent on Google or whatever, making it be, like you said earlier about the work, you have to have people doing good work, because if you're getting client complaints and people don't like your work, your clients aren't coming back to you. They're not sending people. So we started just doing really good work. And to me, that was the most important thing. That sounds so basic, but do good work and make good connections. And then anybody can layer the marketing after that.
You mentioned operations before and systems. So you opened up, you said in 2013?
Correct.
And you brought your brother on. Was that when you started doing the systemization? Was when he came on as the COO?
I started before. I probably started nailing down systems in 2016, but I wasn't good at it. So we started having, systems or so in 2016, but they were struggling, man. It was like the last thing I did, It was there, but it wasn't really there. Or I would always try to get other employees brought on into documenting it. They don't want to do that, and they're not going to do it. So it wasn't until Tony, my brother, came on that we really started okay, we're going to have systems for how we do things, and we're going to hold people accountable to following them, because that's the other part, right? Like accountability.
I was just going to say, a monthly audit where you random audit, is this system being followed? Is it efficient? Is it effective? All the stuff I hate to do. So what was the epiphany? You hated to do it. You weren't good at it. You brought your brother on.
He started doing it, and when he started doing it, we started being more efficient, and we started being able to handle, and capacity opens up, and you're like, oh, okay, spending the money, and spending the money on somebody in that seat, and spending the money on better software, better systems, and spending the time on that, and having people do it when they thought it was just something that was a pain for them. It made their lives easier, and it's made it so, and somebody's now not having to explain how we do this or that. It's just documented. It's there. You learn it. You do it once. And now we're able to service more clients. I mean, systems are the key to efficiency. If you don't do that, you're not going anywhere. You're not going to be able to handle very many clients.
How are you feeling about your KPIs and your data?
Good. We actually just finished a major project to build new dashboards, which is another thing like I wouldn't have done before. I wouldn't have invested in. I was kind of like, we had our ways of getting the data, but now being able to look and to know, hey, anytime I want to know where are we at with intake, where are we at on the legal team, who's productive, where are we at? You are nothing without your data, and you're not going to grow. I definitely think, you can hustle and grow to a couple million, but you're not going to really grow much past 5 unless you're really on it with your data. So
data and systems, data systems and people.
Yep. That's the thing. Like I never would have been the person to build the data. I just want to look at it. I just want to play around with it. But having that and having KPIs and accountability for the team, you can't hold people accountable to KPIs if you don't have a handle on the data. So it all starts with data and systems.
Right.
That's been hitting the stride for me in a way that I feel like, wasn't a few years ago. So that's huge.
Yeah. And sharing the data with the team. Let them see that they're winning or they're struggling. And it opens up the conversations. It's not.
It does.
I tried to explain to people as we were rolling out EOS, it's not about micromanagement, right? No. The data opens up conversations for me. Right. It speaks to me. I'm a very numbers oriented person. So when I look, I could look at the P&L and all of a sudden it's opening up conversations I need to have in whatever line item I'm looking at. Right. Or the questions. And I feel like that's our job too, is to know the numbers, have financial literacy, because a lot of people stick their head in the sand.
They do, because they don't want to know. If you're not confronted with it too, even the staff, like there's all kinds of data, right? So there's how much revenue you're generating. There's, but NPS scores for attorneys and staff, like they don't want to know. That's data that matters. And they're like, why are we doing this? Why are we asking people? I'm like, because we want to know if there's a problem ahead of time. That's data that they don't really want to be confronted with. But then when it's good, you get to be like, hey, this client loves you. That's great. You have to give the good data as well as the data they need to improve on. You have to.
A system that every firm should steal from you. One system that you're like, if I wish I was doing this forever, it's really been amazing for me.
One system everybody should have. Well, it sounds so basic, but everybody should have an intake team. And everybody should have that intake team systemized. Like we have what's called Gold Team, and they are the team that's frontline for the consults. And we've got a direct system of how they handle those consultations, and having a system for your intake, and not just the calls coming in, but the lawyers that are handling the consultations. Having an intake system and having a first line. Not everybody gets to do consultations. Not everybody gets to play. Only the best get to do them. And having that system, I think you can't lose. You got to close them. Doesn't matter how many leads you have. You got to close them.
Right. Yeah, listen, intake, and people spend so much money on the marketing piece, and then their intake falls apart, and it's like, maybe stop spending as much and fix intake.
Fix intake. Right? Intake has to be first.
Yeah. One hire you made too late that you wish you made earlier in the game.
Somebody to handle HR and benefits, and somebody to handle the administration. I should have made that hire at 15 or 20. I didn't make that hire till about 30. So
They don't tell you that, right? They don't tell you office manager at 7, HR at 15. Like those are pretty hard and fast numbers at this point. Like if you hit 15 people and you're stressed, it's because you need an HR person.
You need an HR person. That was a hire I made. I should have made a lot earlier.
Yeah. So listen, I want to be. Thank you for listening to this episode of Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Go anywhere podcasts are distributed. Follow us. Leave us a 10-star review. Share some episodes with your friends. And thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you. This episode is sponsored by Tona Law. They're not just another law firm. They're defining what it means to fight for their clients. We get a lot of attorney referrals from across the country. We pay fee participation in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. We focus on integrity, innovation, and relentless advocacy. Tona Law is proving that the business of law can scale without losing its heart. Do you want to see how a modern firm is built for impact and happy client referrals? Check out tonalaw.com. Mention again the Lead Counsel Podcast, and I'm happy to get on the phone with you.